I am excited to help kick off and launch this afternoon's general session with a panel that dives into one of our most critical pathways in innovation, from campus to commerce. What is that journey? The session is supported by the University of Texas at Arlington, and we are grateful for their support in highlighting the journey from research to real-world impact. Moderating this session is someone who knows this journey well, Laura Peter, who is an honorary member of the NAI and the Executive Director of the Office of Research, Commercialization, and Partnerships at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. So please help me in welcoming Laura Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to invite my fellow panelists to come in and join me on stage. And we'll settle in here. Everyone's kind of sleepy after lunch, I think. So it's lovely to be here. This is such a marvelous conference to honor innovation in America and innovation, especially in universities. And it's absolutely my honor and pleasure to be moderating this great panel. As Elizabeth kindly said, I am the executive director at UNC Charlotte of the Tech Transfer Office. I'm the former deputy director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and so I worked with Elizabeth back in the day. And the whole innovation ecosystem is what this process is about. And we have these esteemed panelists here today, who I'm going to introduce right now. We have Dr. Siva Vanapali, who's a senior member of the NAI from Texas Tech and the founder and CEO of Nema Life. We have Dr. Dennis Liotta, who's a fellow NAI member and professor of chemistry at Emory. We have Dr. Troy Brady, who is the IP Exchange Director of Commercialization at Auburn. And we have Dr. Ray Lee, who's a senior NAI member, Vice Chair of Translational Research, Department of Radiology, University of North Carolina of Medicine. So again, I want to welcome you all. I'm hopeful that this will be a very interactive session. We're going to elicit great responses from our esteemed panel. And if you have questions, please put them in your app, I believe is the methodology, and we'd love to hear from you and make this more of a conversation, especially toward the end of the session. So this session, as I mentioned, celebrates a crucial part of the innovation journey, and that's bringing the innovation out of the lab and getting it into the marketplace. These professors are responsible for creating some of the greatest innovations of our day that solve the grand challenges that we're facing. But they often get stuck in the lab. And so what I'm hoping to hear from this panel is how we get them out of the lab so that society can reap the benefit of their innovations. And of course, with the changing landscape, we are finding new ways of bringing innovation from the lab to the market, and I'll be interested to hear from this panel how that process has been changing, especially in light of changes within the last 5 months and the economic shift from public funding more toward industry funding. And let's just jump in. So, Siva, yep. Welcome. Thank you. I'm going to start with you and tell us about you and your innovation and what problems you were trying to solve.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Appreciate this opportunity. Just in terms of the journey which I've experienced, as you mentioned, I'm a professor at Texas Tech, and I've been there about 16 years. And out of my lab there, we have commercialized 2 important technologies in the space of high throughput screening. And the recent one, I'm more actively involved as a startup. And the focus of this technology is to really think about how to shape all the future of ingredient innovation. Ingredients means our supplements, our functional actives in foods, and so on. So basically, we have a platform which involves AI and high throughput screening to identify new actives which can be used in all these products. I guess I can speak about the challenges afterwards, or would you like me to elaborate now?
Well, let's just carry on and we'll introduce each of our panelists and what they were experiencing in their lab, at least as far as bringing something from lab to market. What was your innovation, Dr. Liotta?
Thanks. Well, I've had a lot of experience in drug development. Back in the early days, about 3 decades ago, my lab co-invented 2 HIV drugs, emtricitabine and lamivudine, and they're both still first-line therapies today. I also was a co-founder of a company called Pharmaset, which developed the first curative agent for hepatitis C, sofosbuvir. And the company was eventually acquired by Gilead Sciences for $11.2 billion. So this gave me 2 different diverse sets of experience. One was a licensing arrangement from the university. The other was a purely equity arrangement from a company which a colleague and I co-founded. But both of them led me to the conclusion that we had to, if we wanted to extract as much value as possible, we had to hold on to the technology and develop it further, because if you license early, you get very little of the real valuation possible. So in order to do this, we devised a kind of radical plan to address 4 specific characteristics. One is, of course, if you're going to hold on to technology, you need additional funding, how we were going to do that. And then we wanted to make sure our tech transfer office was in alignment with this, because clearly, as you're running up patent expenses, they're paying for it. And if they'll typically not want to do that for a very long period of time. And then we knew if we were going to commercialize things, I'm a guy who never left school, so we needed people who had real drug development experience from the commercial sector. And that was important. And then finally, we had to figure out a way, when we did get some kind of financial milestone in, how do we reinvest that into the technology? Because that runs afoul of most university intellectual property policies, where there's a revenue sharing formula and the money just gets distributed to inventors, their labs, their departments, their schools. So how do we get around all those things? And this may sound like mission impossible, but we were actually able to do it by creating a new structure. By the way, with the cooperation of the university, created a new structure called Drug Innovation Ventures at Emory. And if I get the chance later on, I'll go into the details.
Perfect. Well, so you brought up so many wonderful things. You talked about how the university is a greenhouse for innovation, that it provides this protective environment where you're not forced to go out and make the next quarter's numbers and the next quarter's sales and all of that kind of thing as you are in industry. And I think that's a super important thing to draw out. The other thing you brought out is the idea that the tech transfer office, you need to work with them and be on good terms with them in order to be able to protect your innovation as it goes along, so it can grow and develop to the product you want to be, so you can get your 1 billion or 11 billion?
Well, I didn't get all 11 billion, but it would have been a nice day if I did.
I'll take 1, yes. Okay. So now I'm going to turn to Dr. Troy Brady to say something, because you are the tech transfer guy on this stage, other than me, and tell us how you reflect on Dr. Liotta's comments.
Yes, so thank you, and you're right. I am not a great inventor, as these other gentlemen are. And so I'm representing a team from Auburn University, a team of inventors on a technology for detection. And yes, there are various challenges, as you mentioned, many steps in the process. It's complicated. And every path to commercialization is somewhat tailored and unique. And so it takes a lot of partnering and working together, being able to compromise, understand where other parties are coming from, and figuring out how to make it work and work in a realistic way so that it can be successful. And so, no credit to me is from an inventor standpoint, and I certainly give all credit to the inventors for their brilliance in coming up with these amazing technologies. The one that from Auburn that I'm here for is called Vaporwake, and is started actually back in 1988. It was first inspired by the Pan Am bombing. Airplane bombing way back then, and then later was further focused by the notorious underwear bomber, and all had to do with detection of a target. These instances were bombs, but the technology that was developed is broader than bomb detection, but it focuses on detection of a moving target. And how do you track and follow and locate that moving target, and particularly in a large venue, such as either an airport or a sports arena or something like that.
You know, what strikes me, I practiced in industry for 30 years before I moved on and certainly moved into academia. And I think the role of the tech transfer office is so different from a licensing person in industry, because you're actually trying to protect and encourage the innovator to get their innovation to evolve enough so it can actually get to the market. Whereas in industry, the product is the product and you need to get it out the door and get it licensed. Dr. Lee, you are a scientist, something more along the line of Dr. Liotta. Please tell us your path to commercialization and your innovation.
I think, unlike our other esteemed speakers here, my experience has actually been primarily in taking the IP or idea out of the lab and applying it straight, typically first in human studies. And because of that, I cover a lot of other people's IP also, in terms of watching it and helping evolve it from an idea, a concept. And a lot of my space is medical imaging, and as a clinical radiologist, I can sort of see that. And my distinct sort of position allows me, because of my technical background, to sort of interact with both the true scientists and engineers, physicists who develop the ideas, plus the clinicians who are going to be excited and to get the clinician. So I serve as a bridge between those two communities. But for our own inventions, we rely heavily on my Office of Technology Transfer for a couple things. Number one is mentoring, right? We can come up with the ideas, but how do you get it to the next step? I'm constantly, Harmon is on my speed dial to beg him to say, what do we do next? Especially, we had somebody out of the blue offer us money and for one of our ideas that we hadn't even submitted for patent, and we're scrambling to get that covered and make sure we were covered appropriately. I've watched our OTD also, Harmon specifically, mentor my trainees in that respect, because they're the ones who are still innovating, obviously with a little bit of mentorship from me, but how do we cover that and how do we get things moving forward? So I think the role of OTD, the role of these products, I've also watched multiple products fail. Maybe it's not a good thing to be associated with me. I've had decades of watching products not make it, but it's also given me experience to sort of say, geez, what can actually make it? Nothing as beautiful as the Hep C drug or the early HIV drugs. I was there in training way back when and watched in California as that sort of disease became understood. But it's still important because at the same time I watched other things that we thought were better than sliced bread not succeed for different reasons and unexpected reasons, which fast forward 20 years, they're finally succeeding, but definitely through a very, very different pathway than I would have expected when I joined that lab in San Diego, now pushing 30 years ago. So that's my role, for good or bad, maybe the black cloud, but I do think it's critical to sort of try to understand what these potential failure pathways are and how to champion an idea out of the lab into first in humans and then eventually the commercialization side, which definitely other people have greater experience than I do.
Well, what is the old expression? You don't have failures, you have many, many tests until you finally succeed.
I'm way up there on that list.
So, Siva, please tell us about why you decided to take the step to commercialization and how that evolved.
Yeah, I think I can speak to the kind of this inventor's perspective because in the startups which I've been involved in, it involved a student and the faculty. So, I think often PIs are definitely excited about the curiosity, and then the invention happens. Then that ideation and invention, how do you take that out of the lab, right? So, at least in the examples which I have experienced, it was the graduate student and me as a team who basically tried to commercialize it.
Why did you want to commercialize it?
I think at the stage at which the ideation process was, we understood that the science and engineering was established. And we were presenting this technology at conferences. And other labs, other PIs were really excited about it. So I think that initial excitement drove us to think broadly about the opportunity of commercialization, because we could see that other people were asking us to ship like samples of it. So in that sense, it was an organic progression of taking that invention out of the lab into the commercial space. So I think of course, an equal aspect of this is the student-driven enthusiasm as well. Entrepreneurship, at least as PIs, at least in terms of the optics, which I've seen, students are an important aspect of it. And as long as you have that right student with the right optics, I think it can organically lead to like a commercialization outcome. Yeah, so I think so. We basically started as founders, and then Texas Tech has really nice opportunities to do the accelerator program, which allows us.
Is that I-Corp?
So no, it's our own
Own accelerator program?
own accelerator program, which involves our community as well. So as a result, there's a very nice infrastructure in place. And then we started the I-Corp program, and then we wrote the SBIR grants. So all of that was a progression which allowed us to take the technology out of the lab into the commercial space.
Dr. Liotta, I want to get to you next because I think your story is very interesting. But I do want to ask, how much did the university support your path? One, to take that first step to figure out how to commercialize, and then the accelerator and the I-Corps and SBIR grants and so on.
Yeah, I think in this case, it was 100% along the way. So I think, having the Office of Research and Commercialization originally at the IP phase of patenting to having these very nice steps of journey, which allows you to think about, is this an enterprise which you should be engaged in? And I think having those checkpoints along the place is very, very important. And I think at least at Texas Tech, they have a very nice pipeline established, which allows students and faculty to organically do this.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Dr. Liotta, so you've done both. You've done the pure licensing and you've done the startup, right? So tell me about the difference in the path to those, and as a scientist, which one you prefer?
So there are challenges. Today, I'd probably prefer the startup route because federal funding is questionable going forward. But I do think that there is a hybrid, and we were able to create drug innovation ventures at Emory we call Drive, And Drive is a wholly owned subsidiary of the university, but it's an independent unit, and it's got its own single-membered LLC. So it's not subject to all the rules and regulations of the university. In doing so, we could circumvent the university intellectual property policy, and everything just became a direct negotiation with the senior administration and with the full support of our Office of Technology Transfer. And through that mechanism, we were able to bring in people from the commercial sector who had years of experience in antiviral drug development. And that now gave us that extra edge that we needed to move forward. So a very short case history here that I think is interesting. If you look at the history of pandemics over the last 100 years, you'll note that they're getting closer and closer together. And we will have another pandemic probably in the next 5 years. Maybe it'll be bird flu, maybe it'll be something else. But they're very closely spaced. And about 80% of them derive from single-stranded RNA virus infection. So we already knew we had a pretty high probability. We knew what the general target was. And we were pretty experienced in this area. So we decided to look for a broad spectrum antiviral that was active against at least 5 or 6 single-stranded RNA viruses. We started doing this about 12 years ago, and when the pandemic came, we actually had an agent. We didn't know it at the time, but we had an agent which proved to be very potent against SARS-CoV-2, and we were about to file an IND for flu. We immediately changed it to SARS-CoV-2 and got a license from Ridgeback Biotherapeutics. They advanced it through phase 1. Then they did a deal with Merck. And eventually this compound was one of 2 that got emergency use authorization, an oral agent that worked well against COVID-19, but also maybe the first agent we have ready for the next pandemic. The important message here is we chose a target that pharma won't touch. Pharma does not go after hypothetical markets. Right. So we were doing something that I think academics could only do, is develop technology for the future, and then when the pandemic came, we were prepared to go forward.
So this is so important. I think most people in this audience probably understand this, but I think a lot of people on Capitol Hill, for example, don't. That the universities provide a space for experimentation that industry won't probably go after because they don't see the profit in it yet. They won't let you go paddle around your lab for 12 years. Exactly. Right? And who was your funding from during most of that time?
So our funding was actually from the revenues, the royalty revenues that we got from previous inventions, and we convinced the university that this was a good use of the funds. Since we had been successful in the past, they figured that this would work pretty well.
So you're extraordinary. That's not a usual path
No,
for most.
there is. I mean, there are other ways of doing it, but I think we've been loath as a community to reach out to not only the traditional venture capitalists, but also to high net worth individuals who might well see the value of this, see the opportunity to fill a niche. And I think especially these days, we need to do more of that, because there are a lot of very committed individuals out there who would like to make a difference in their own way. And by funding what they consider to be important research. That's their way of doing it.
I think that you're onto something. Troy, can you speak to that? Does the IP Exchange fill that role of being sort of an independent entity, or is there an arm of Auburn that has foundation kind of aura around it to support this kind of research?
So IPX at Auburn University, we are part of the university proper, so not a separate entity. There is a foundation, but that largely manages the research part. Doesn't have a separate fund per se to help fund research, but we do work closely with them on particular projects. And so we try and work closely with the innovators on campus to just help position the technology in the most attractive way and help facilitate commercialization.
And how do you position these innovations? What is it that you do?
What is
it that you're doing to position these innovations so that they're more relatable to industry, to license?
So we certainly try and work hand in hand with the inventors, typically the faculty members, and work together with them, ideally early on. And so try and identify as early as we can what might the potential challenges be to commercialization. Is that scale up? Is it cost of production? Is it market size? Or do we know who the market is? Or do we need to try and explore that a little bit more and figure that out? What do we think that path is to commercialization, and what is the development that needs to happen to get it there?
Now, in my humble experience, I have found that not all scientists want to be business people, or they're not often good at being business people. And that's a delicate diplomatic dance to walk. What is your experience, and how do you handle that?
Well, that's a good point. They are different worlds, and some people are well positioned to kind of straddle both of those worlds, and some are better in one than the other. And so we are certainly open to working with the faculty member as much as they want to be involved, but we also want we also want that technology to be successful, just as the inventors do. And so it often is a dance, and trying to figure out, okay, what does the faculty member want? What do they see, and what do they want, and how can we help meet those needs? As well as the company partner, which is often involved, whether it's a startup or whether it's an existing company, and how can we meet those two needs? So often there is kind of conversations with both parties and figuring that out, and then trying to find where is that middle ground where those needs can be met.
Now, Dr. Lee, I think that from our earlier conversations, you are more comfortable being in the science side of things rather than the business side of things, but you've been pushed to be the person the collaborator, the person who pulls everything together. Can you comment on your experience between the business and the science?
I certainly work with other team members and scientists who are highly expert in that space. And so a lot of the more successful ventures that we've been a part of, or I've been a part of, have been executed by people who've formed the companies and executed. They brought in experience through, I think, their own sort of path of training, if you will, and working in industry and then coming back in order to be successful.
How did you find them?
Some of it was as a graduate student, having a certain level of expertise that nobody else on campus happened to have at that point in time. Finding good collaborators who are willing to work with you and who understood, and that you meshed with in terms of execution. And they knew very early on I wasn't the business person, right? I'm a physician first, maybe. The second is the bridge, and the third is my technical background. But nothing in that is the business side of things. And so I rely heavily on them. And I try to, especially as a physician, you have the conflicts of interest, especially at our institution, made it more complex, but it also gave me opportunities for certain inventors. I serve as their solution to the conflicts of interest because I'm not conflicted on their patents, so I can execute quickly or more rapidly in that space. I understand the technology, I believe in it, but I have no financial tie to the actual patent. So that's been my little pathway that's, I think, unique. But others, physicians have served as my solution to conflicts of interest in terms of our first-in-human trials because I am on the patent and I need people who are not conflicted to be leading those studies. So,
Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. That's something that we do deal with all the time, are the conflicts of interest and trying to respect those lines. And yet we're also always trying to reach out to industry to attract, you know, the support and the business acumen. One thing I do want to mention is that the NAI has this marvelous Campus to Commerce video series, and I think that helps to make many of these issues more relatable. And it also talks about how industry can engage with faculty and understand what they're going through. I feel like, Troy, half of your and my job is translating. We're translating from science to law, and then from science to business, and then trying to get the business back to the scientist. And it's very, very fun and interesting, but these kind of videos help. I have to say, UNC Charlotte just had theirs released by the NAI, and it's marvelous, so I hope you all get to look at it. Siva, was there anything that your tech transfer office did that you think was particularly helpful in your early stage? Were they bugging you, saying, don't go out and speak unless you talk to us first? Were they proactive?
No, I don't think that they were harassing me, to be honest. You know, as I mentioned earlier, ours was a very organic progression. So in that sense, the
Over how many years?
Sorry?
Over how many years did your technology evolve?
Yeah, so I think the original invention or the IP disclosure or invention disclosure happened, I believe, somewhere in 2016 or 2015 or so. And the startup was spun off in 2018. And right now, this startup has about 16 employees.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, so I think in those early years, you know, because our tech transfer office deals with all kinds of inventions, I think it's hard to spot or have the bandwidth to know which ones to actually focus on. So in this case, it was me and my graduate student who drove the ship in terms of exciting them and having them involved. However, after that initial click, I think they were on board in terms of the other programs like NSFI Core and the accelerator program and all of that. So I think that initial engine it's very important to have the PI and the student, I think, have to do that because the domain expertise, it lies within us. So in that sense, having that initial understanding of the technology, I think usually comes from us as PIs and students, and then the tech transfer office and the infrastructure is available to expand as much as you want.
Dr. Liotta, you've been doing this for a while. In the early days when you started off around, you said, I think 2010, with this commercial venture, was the tech transfer office actively engaging with you? I mean, one thing I found is that we're forgotten sometimes, is that scientists get really busy and they're doing their thing and they're like, oh, I'm going to go out and publish a paper, and we're like, wait, you know, 2 days before, wait. What is your experience with that, and did you have a more proactive office?
So my experience with tech transfer goes back to the 1990s. And let me just say that just like scientists evolve and get more experience, so do tech transfer offices, and so do universities.
Yes.
Universities can be amongst the most risk-adverse places in the world.
Yeah.
They want to have big new revenue streams coming in, but aren't necessarily anxious to take any risks. Tech transfer offices or, they don't have carte blanche to do whatever they want. And in our early days, our tech transfer initiative got in the way as much as it helped. I'd say we have evolved significantly.
What did they do to get in the way?
Well, if you have to file a patent application, don't necessarily choose the least expensive group. Choose the one that will put together a robust patent that can be defended. Our first few patent applications were not as robust as I would have liked, and the consequences are when we were commercializing them that we got involved in a 6.5-year litigation, which ended up costing the university about $20 million. Now, we talk about partnering. The university had enough belief in their position that they did. They put up that money, and we were successful in our outcome. And at the time, that was a surprise, because most pharmaceutical companies in litigations, all they did was drag things out for a long enough period of time that finally the university said, we can't spend any more money on this. We just have to settle for some marginal piece. But I think we've learned a lot collectively. And I would say I have an excellent relationship with our technology transfer office. I think they're very good, and they try really hard, even with serious financial constraints on them, to do the best job that they could. So they're our partners, and I think we have to remember that. We have to treat them as partners, respect them, and work with them, and try and find solutions to moving things forward in a constructive way. I could tell you plenty of stories, but we don't have 3 hours to do that.
Well, over a cocktail,
Yes,
I'd like to hear all those stories. So Troy, how do you encourage innovators to disclose to you, and how do you choose, the golden nugget that's going to pay the $11 million, but you don't know it at the time?
That's an excellent question. And anyone that's in tech transfer understands the challenge of doing that. So to address the first question, we try to provide value for the faculty member so that their interactions with us are easy, that we're responsive, and that we can provide them with something of value from that interaction. And so hopefully that gives them reason to come back and to continue to work with us. And how do we choose those nuggets? Well, there is a process, and so we do look at can it be patented? Is there a market? And if so, what's the size potential of that market? But we also consider other things, right? What's the societal impact as well? What would the...
But like Dr. Liotta's RNA technology, nobody thought it was worth its salt at the time, and here it was the cure to COVID.
Yeah, yes. And so, yes, there are a number of factors that go into the decision around that, and what to go forward with and what not. And unfortunately, sometimes resources are constrained, and so you can't pursue and support everything. So sometimes it's an educated guess, and we always try and work with the faculty member to make that decision. And the ideal outcome is that we and the faculty member see the same thing and come to the same decision. It doesn't always happen that way, but we certainly work to try and do that. And if resources are constrained, then there are occasions where we'll try and actually go elsewhere and see if money can be found or contributed from other sources to pursue something where we may not have that bandwidth.
Well, let me turn to Dr. Lee. Part of getting something from lab to market is getting the market interested. How do you get the word out about your innovation to the marketplace? Does the university support you in that path? Are you engaged with industry partners day to day in your research, and that's how you come to meet them? Are there forums that you seek out? How did you find that path?
I think for me personally, our area of expertise is medical imaging. So it's a natural, our natural conferences, we have long-standing engagements, and because in one of our areas I build devices from the ground up, I'm speaking to manufacturers on a regular basis. And for every modality, imaging modality that I touch, we're interacting with both their salespeople, sort of understanding, geez, what's coming down the pipeline from the company's perspective, but also their research people to the level that you can, obviously without an NDA in place, and trying to get them excited about your particular things. Obviously, as you publish and as the word gets out there, we were surprised, when one of our new compounds, we all of a sudden started getting inquiries through back channels to the university that people wanted to invest and try to figure out where we were, to figure out where they wanted to invest and if it was ready, things like that. So I think it's experience, it's knowledge. I think there's obviously subject matter experts, which I can sort of claim to be, but there's market level experts. And I've seen technologies that have passed by my desk that, the subject matter expert was a spectacular expert, brilliant. But I also, as a person who's knowledgeable about that particular market, I didn't see it because I just didn't see it, and I couldn't see it. And I tried every which way to sort of put it in the right box so that maybe it had success. And not unexpectedly, when our OTD tried to, explore it with some students and some case studies, we didn't get much, bite on that particular idea. So I think there's a market level expert that's a combination of people who are actually on the industry side of things, combined with, everyday users. And we in academia, the ivory tower, are so far away from that on a typical basis. Sometimes we have to sort of take a step back and let the market or let real users take a look at things. It may be obvious for certain drugs, but especially in my space, it's a huge capital investment that you're talking about to purchase a new piece of equipment. And so somebody's got to make that decision. And I'm surprised by the hits sometimes and the misses.
So the environment is shifting a little bit. Federal funding at least appears to be being diminished somewhat. And so alternative avenues for funding needs to be explored, and that's a good thing. But have you found that industry partners are more aggressive about demanding the IP rights so that the billion-dollar company may not land in Dr. Liotta's backyard, but rather in industries?
At least from my experience, I think they're generally respectful. They understand that working with the university has certain expectations, and that they already know from experience. So I'm less concerned about that. I think the more practical side of things is, I've gotten off my high horse a little bit, especially as a physician, in terms of being willing to work with industry, finding avenues that make sense to line up and collaborate more. We've always done that, but I've much more aggressively sort of started thinking about that as a pathway to take an idea that we have, and get it to commercialization faster. Part of it's the practical side of things, where maybe I don't need to make the full, financial benefit from that particular idea. Sometimes I just want to see it get the market because I think it'll help the community. But of course, that's a case-by-case and sort of situation-by-situation and technology-by-technology decision.
Well, we're going to take some questions here in a minute, but before we do, let me open it to the three of you if you have any comments on that changing environment.
Yes, I think that, we have to, if we're going to work with either people in the commercial sector, philanthropists, others, I think in general, we have to do a better job understanding the competitive landscape, because most people if you ask them, tell me about your technology, and they do, and oh, what else out there is like that? There's really nothing. And then you go and do a deep dive, and you find out that there are 5 patent applications pending and 2 issued patents. And a lot of people simply don't really understand that competitive landscape, and that is, as soon as you work with people from commercial sector, they're just going to brush you off because you are obviously a novice. So I think that is very important, and understanding intellectual property much more than the typical little introductory course that many people take can be very valuable. Keeping up with important decisions that come from the courts, other things of that sort. If you get in the habit of doing that, it can be very helpful when you talk to people, because if you come across as sophisticated and knowledgeable, they like the technology, they'll work with you as opposed to other people.
Yeah, no, I have found that some of our faculty work in their little bubble and bring in invention disclosure, and I'm like, do you know there are like 30 other patents in this space? But anyway. Oh, Siva, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I think probably I want to maybe expand in terms of the experience I had as a founder and engaging in the startup which I have. I think industry, at least from our viewpoint, is broadly could be classified as entry level, like in terms of industry sponsored research. I'm talking about industry sponsored research. There are plenty of other startups who are trying to do research cheaply. So you could think of using those startups as a way to sponsor research in your own lab. Second, of course, you have the global giants, where there's a lot of innovation managers, R&D managers, R&D teams. And, industry is always trying to figure out how to do it in the most efficient way. So I think, even though we are in this climate of crunch in terms of support and funding, I think, if you're willing to expose, again, I'm speaking about as a PI. If you're willing to expose on LinkedIn and other channels which you have, you could generate a lot of industry-sponsored research out of that.
Interesting. Troy, do you have any comments on the changing landscape and getting funding?
You bet. So it's the brilliant minds of the inventors, right, that bring the industry in to work with the university. So we try and make it as easy as possible for the company, and we're in the process of trying to roll out kind of that menu of IP options for a company to select from. And
so just to expand on that, I think what you're talking about is varying levels of exclusivity all the way up to maybe an assignment. I don't know.
Right, yes. And this is not new. Other universities do this and have done this for a number of years. And so we are trying to do what we can to be responsive to the company, show that we want to be easy to work with, and that we want to work with them. And so we want to support our faculty in that way as they innovate and develop those relationships that we can help support and make those easy to.
But isn't there this constant tension that you want to keep the IP for the university because you want the professor to be able to continue their research and build on it, and if it gets assigned out or if the rights are too much, that could stunt the growth of that particular technology?
So it does need to be something that you coordinate with the faculty member on, for sure. And before anything any IP rights would be obligated, we want to make sure that the faculty member knows and is aware and is on board. And so, yes, always want to have those lines of communication open so that everybody is aware and knows what's happening.
Brilliant. Well, we've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to open it up to some questions.
Sure. Question number 1. The America Invents Act of 2012 significantly changed the patent law landscape and the inner workings of the U.S. patent system. It can be argued that the unintended consequences of the act are clearly evident when considering the positioning and actions of some companies with respect to their willingness to infringe upon inventors' rights. What advice do you have for protecting inventors' rights with respect to the change in the act?
So let me kind of characterize that question for a university landscape, because I think that could go into a very, very broad discussion. Dr. Liotta, you were talking about how your patents ended up in litigation, and you were fortunate that the university was able to fund it. But it sounds to me like they got a little uncomfortable at certain points in time because of the expense. And the AIA has allowed for certain kinds of what are supposed to be shortcut challenges to patents so that it won't be so expensive. And whether that's effective or not is not for this panel to decide. But if you have any comments on the cost of litigation and what it takes for a university to be able to engage in that, I think that would be interesting.
So a patent is meant to prevent others from practicing your invention. And its only value comes when you are willing to defend that patent. If you allow others to practice your invention with impunity and to make and sell your product, then you can't be in this game. It's unfortunate, but I think you have to try hard. Now, it's hard enough if you have an infringer in the United States. If you have an infringer outside of the US, it's very, very hard to challenge them. And so you have to be really, that's why I work so hard trying to get our initial applications, that initial provisional filing, to be as robust as possible. And then many times, if you have a good case, sometimes you can actually form a syndicate with some people who are willing to put up the money to go out and challenge the infringers. And of course, they get something for it. But in the long run, that's better than not having anything at all.
I think one problem that I've seen in the university is that there are many companies in industry that are very generous and fund other professors' research and provide funding for buildings and all this kind of stuff, and you can't exactly go around and sue them. So there's that constant conflict. Does anyone else have a comment on this issue?
That does come up. Or you have a family member who ends up on a board of trustees or something for the university that's related to a licensee, anyway, all different kinds of conflicts, yes.
And we just have to navigate them the best we can. Another question, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
How can senior university administrators, for example, a president or provost, help or hinder the innovation and commercialization process?
I love this question. So I know we have Dr. Pines, who's going to be speaking in a bit at the University of Maryland, and he's been a champion of innovation. And so I'll turn it over to perhaps Dr. Lee, your
Sure.
university, how the senior leadership supports it?
The primary is, finding barriers to whichever, right, from anything along the pathway. Meaning, the IP distribution from an inventor's scale perspective, I understood early on what UNC Chapel Hills was, then following in terms of other barriers that might encounter. And I think reducing those barriers or minimizing them, the conflicts of interest is one that often came up at my university, for good or for bad and for whatever. But that's one thing that made it very hard for us, because you're trying to invent, and right, who better to execute than your local people? And when you're talking 6 months to 1 year delays, just to get the paperwork done, that became very, very untenable. And so that's one thing that was addressed, and we found ways and sort of reused pathways to address that, as an example. So I think senior administrators listening and responding and finding pathways to maintain integrity, but simultaneously address the issues that need to be addressed is critical. And obviously that's university specific.
Shiva, what has been your experience at Texas Tech? Have the senior leadership been champions of innovation?
Yeah, but I think the answer is in general yes. However, after listening to this discussion here, I think it seems like there are opportunities for innovating other ways of engaging inventors. As an example, about the DRIVE initiative. I thought it was a very novel way of feeding in the royalty income into like a flywheel, which can hopefully generate additional revenues. I thought that was quite unique.
Closed circuit,
Yeah,
indeed.
closed circuit,
Yeah.
and still independent. So I think, again, in this group, I think having these kinds of ideas are really important to bridge this divide between academia and commercialization, I think, in general.
Dr. Liotta?
So you've all heard the old cliche, I think it was Mark Twain who said, everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Well, everybody talks about innovation, entrepreneurship, and they ought to make that an important part of every capital campaign that the university does. And in doing so, they actually can probably do a much better job raising money, because it just dispenses this idea that the university is the ivory tower. Here we have a bunch of really smart people who are trying to address important societal issues, to try and address, in our case, unmet medical needs. People respond to those kinds of claims. And it's a tactical error to avoid those things. And in fact, they could do so much better if they made this front and center an important part
You are
of their...
totally preaching to the choir here.
Yes.
Totally. But I do know there are folks in universities who believe that money is attracted to the university better for supporting the sports teams and supporting naming of buildings and all this kind of thing, which kind of circles back to our earlier discussion about whether there should be some kind of venture fund just for innovation, so that those people who care about innovation can, support it within the university. Troy, do you have any comments?
I think that, senior leadership, as they message out the importance of innovation and the impact, and encourage that and foster that at the university. I completely agree with Dr. Liotta that messaging that out creates a positive image and vibe for the university. And I agree. I think it could result in greater fundraising and just better relationships, better image, just a positive.
Yeah, no, I did our Invention of the Year program, and one thing I made sure to do was bring in industry as judges so they could learn about the technology. And I had one very senior chief IP officer of a giant bank say, Laura, I had no idea this was happening at Charlotte. How can I support you? Mm-hmm. So getting that word out, I think, is just so essential. And again, I think what the National Academy of Inventors is doing is phenomenal in helping to translate that message out. So at this point, I will thank our panel so much. It was a delight to hear their words of wisdom, and we'll congratulate them.
Thank you.
Thank you.